Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I got a really good question from a viewer the other day that I thought would make a great video topic. This is something I haven't talked about before, and that is simply what are some of the best baits to use when you have sunny, flat, calm conditions? And honestly, I think this is one of the most critical decisions you can make on those types of days. I've fished a lot of places over the years, and one thing that I have found is if you're not throwing the right baits on sunny, flat, calm conditions and fishing in the right areas, you can a lot of times really put yourself in a tough position. You're just not going to catch that many fish. One of the keys to note with respect to this type of fishing is that generally speaking, the fish are going to be in or around cover. It does not matter on the time of the year. So if you're fishing during a cold water period, the fish a lot of times will be around cover because that cover is absorbing heat from the sunlight, producing warmth, and therefore the fish are going to hang out around those objects. During the warmest part of the year, the fish are actually going to sit in the shade created by those objects. That shade will generally have much cooler water. One thing I noticed this past weekend when I was fishing with the kids was how quickly water can actually cool off in the shade. In areas where I was in the sun, that water felt really warm. As soon as you'd get into a little shade pocket, whether that was from a tree casting a shadow on the water, you could feel that just while you were swimming. So the fish are going to be moving around based on that shade, and that shade is being created by objects, whether that's an overhanging tree, a dock, a big clump of weeds. The fact is that that sun on those flat, calm conditions is going to position the fish generally around cover. So, having said that, I'm going to be fishing around cover, whether it is because I'm looking for the warmth in the cold water periods or I'm looking for shade in the warm water periods. The key here is to note that those fish a lot of times are going to be tight to cover. And if you're tight to cover, a lot of times what that does is it removes a lot of your bait options. For example, I would say throwing a jerk bait during those conditions is probably not the best thing to be doing. A lot of times you're not going to draw the fish away from the cover. The same thing goes for topwaters. Now, obviously, a topwater can be a great bait to throw if you're throwing to specific shade pockets, but if you're just out casting over a flat, probably not going to get as many bites with the topwater as you would some other bait choices. Today's video is brought to you by the Deep Dive app, which will help you select the best fishing places in the lake with features like the lake level, the current flow, the top baits tool, which will help you select the best baits for certain locations throughout the lake. Whether that's a clear water, stained water, dirty water, it'll choose the best bait for that location, provide you with all the information like what structure, what retrieve, different reel, all of the information that you need to catch the fish. This is in the app. The cool part about this app, though, is it's not just based on areas. It does provide you with specific tournament winning data that has been collected to help you figure out your best choices for baits and locations for whatever region of the lake it is that you want to fish. On top of that, not only does the app provide you with best locations, it gives you water clarity as well. So maybe you're on a lake like Lake Eufaula, where there is a bunch of different water clarity located throughout the entire lake. This will help you identify the clearest portions as well as the dirtiest portions of the lake. Plus, the Deep Dive app has now added the wind effect map, which is going to take all of the different wind conditions for the past couple of days and show you what banks on the lake are being hit the hardest. They also have inflow points that show you different places throughout the lake where your water is being flushed into the lake through different ditches and creeks and rivers, providing you with high percentage places to fish and letting you know what parts of the lake are going to be the best areas after a rain. Check out the Deep Dive app to help you become a better angler. So let's get into the bait choices that I really like for flat, sunny conditions. And this is pretty much year round. As an example, I mentioned not to throw jerk bait. Another bait that I don't really like throwing during those sunny, flat, calm conditions is a spinner bait or even a chatter bait. A lot of times those bait produce a lot of flash. So when they capture the sunlight, they create very large flashes, which under flat, calm conditions is not always a good thing. I think a lot of times you can actually spook the fish because you're creating too much flash. So instead of throwing, say, a spinner bait or even a chatterbait, that's when I really think a swim jig shines. Whether you're throwing something that's got a boot tail or a crawtail flapper, the key here is you've really knocked down a lot of that flash. The fish have the bright conditions. They don't need that flash to draw the attention. So I'll switch to a swim jig like this guy right here, generally with a boot tail. And I'll fish that down and through some of the thicker weed or wood cover that I'm fishing. And I feel like I get a lot more bites under those sunny, calm conditions with a swim jig than I would, say, a moving bait. Another absolute must have is your wacky rigs. So if you've got a wacky rig like this Max Scent General, you're talking about throwing this tight to cover, fishing it around those shade pockets, just letting it fall down to where the fish are at. You work it a little bit in the strike zone. If you don't get a bite in the first few feet, you reel in, you throw to the next target. But a wacky rig is a killer bait under those calm, sunny, flat conditions. Now, another one, as I mentioned, that I really like to fish because, again, you're talking about fish being tight to that cover, is an Ozark rig or a Texas rig or a jig, something along these lines, guys. You're looking to put the bait to where the fish are at. It doesn't really matter if it's a cross sell bait like the creature hog here, or if it's a big jig. The point is you're going into where the fish live. You're going to tight objects, whether it's stumps or laydowns, docks. You need to again get your bait to where those fish are. Under flat, sunny, calm conditions, they're not looking to come away from those objects. So you got to go to where they are versus drawing them away from the cover. So similar to the wacky rig, your Ozark rig or Texas rig or jig allows you to put the bait where the fish are. And if you're fishing really thick cover, so whether that's big grass clumps, maybe it's a pad field, maybe it's skipping up under docks. If I'm fishing thicker cover, I'll go with something like the Ozark rig. If I'm fishing more open areas or holes in the grass, that type of thing, that's when I'd go with a wacky rig. But you gotta have some form of weedless presentation to get into those tight areas. Now, one thing I like to do is also get out and fish on some of your deeper flats, on some of your edges. You've got a lot of light penetration in these areas, but you still have a lot of fish that tend to roam, your drop offs, your weed line edges, your rock piles, your boulders, things like that. The key here is the fish are going to be tight to the bottom. Generally, the deeper you go, the less light penetration there is. If the fish can get behind a little weed clump, a little rock pile, a stump, those are going to be the same things as fishing shallower, where the fish are still going to be tight to those objects to get into a little shade pile or get out of some of that sunlight. And that's where I really look for Ned rigs to shine. Now, when I'm fishing these open areas, these drop offs or ledges, a lot of times, again, these fish I feel like don't necessarily want to see a giant bait. Because of your flat, calm conditions, the fish are getting a really good look at it. So a small bait like the Ned rig, this is a little general, is a great presentation to throw for all species of bass. So I have to have a Ned rig anytime I'm fishing flat, calm conditions. Now, the last one that I really like to throw is just your ribbon tail worms. This is a Berkeley power worm, kind of the old staple tequila sunrise color, one of my absolute favorites. This for me is a key bait that I will work down through some of those outside weed line edges or off some of those ledges. Again, I'm not looking to create a big bulky profile that I might need if I've got more current or if I've got a lot of wind that's creating a lot of wave action on the surface that's deflecting the water. It might rile up the water where the water has a lot of sediment in it. The point here is under flat, calm conditions, you're generally talking about some of your cleanest water and some of the best visibility that those fish are going to have. So having something like a ribbon tail worm is not an intimidating object. It lets you work down through the cover without getting a bunch of grass on your baits. And it's a great bait to fish in that 8 to 18 foot range. You can just rig it, Texas rig it, and get it down in and around that grass. But those baits, as you notice, are generally smaller profiles. They're generally slower moving baits that allow me to fish the target versus drawing the fish away from the target, that a lot of times you can utilize much more effectively if you've got overcast windy conditions. But if you've got flat, sunny, calm conditions, these are the baits I'm going with. Let me know in the comment section, what are some of your favorite baits under flat, sunny conditions? I'd love to hear from you guys as well. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. It would be mean a lot to me. So thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.